Hello YouTube. Alright, today we have an exciting new computer build. What are we going to do? We're going to rebuild my bedside computer yet again with a system that I think will be a lot of fun to play with. Now, you guys know the Intel sockets. There was socket, back to the Pentium 4s, there was socket like 423, 478, and 775. And then after 775, it goes straight to 1156. And then to what we have now, 1155. And of course, there were the Xeon sockets in between that, like 771 and stuff like that. But 1156 is a socket that I kind of, I never got to play with it. I saw one Max Arcade video with it, showing the performance of memory bandwidth and stuff like that. But other than that, I haven't really seen much of it. Never really played with it. Some of the computers in my college are 1156 based with Core i5s and stuff like that. So I've always wanted to play with a socket 1156 build and see how it performs, just to use it, And I even asked a few people around on YouTube, what is it like to use these? And based on what one person told me, it's faster than 775, but not quite as fast as 1155 because of the Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge and the memory bandwidth and all that fun stuff. So what we're going to do is put an 1156 build together because I've never done it before, and I thought, why not? Let's have some fun. So let's do it. Okay, here's what we have for putting this build together. That and the parts that I have left over. I bought this ASUS motherboard that was manufacturer recertified from ASUS. Won this in an auction. It's a Pentium dual core on the socket 1156 platform. Still has some grease on it that I need to clean off. But I won this for about $41 plus shipping. So that was a pretty good deal. The Celeron that was my backup just to get the machine going was around $35. So I'm willing to pay a little bit more for a little bit more performance. Fine by that. Now this Pentium dual core is a downgrade from what's in this machine right now, which is that Phenom 2 X4. But this is really just to get the machine running. Eventually I'm going to upgrade this to something better, just like I did that ASRock board in the bedside computer there. So what we're going to do is just use this to get the machine running. This might actually do fine for what I need. But at some point I hope to upgrade it to like an i3 or an i5. Like an i5 540 or something like that would be pretty ideal for this type of system. I also have some leftover RAM here, some DDR3 1600, which probably won't run at 1600 in this board. It'll probably be clocked down to 1333, but that's alright. It's 8 gigs, so it's pretty set for the future. I won't have to upgrade that for quite a long time. But as you guys see, I change these builds all the time, so it might not even matter at that point. So let's take a look at the board. There you have it, folks. Here's the ASUS board I bought. I haven't bought an ASUS board since 2006. So this is the first in a long time that I've actually played with an ASUS board, and the first time I've played with socket 1156 platform. So it's kind of it's kind of a refresher and an all new experience all at the same time. So kind of cool if you ask me. So let's take a look at this board. This board is manufacturer recertified, so it's just squeaky clean. It's a socket 1156 platform, as you can see there. Let me turn the light on. There you have it. They actually put this thing in, which is good to see. So hopefully the pins aren't bent at all. If they are, I'm going to be really mad, actually. 2 RAM slots. It appears to have IDE and floppy headers on it, which is pretty nice. Which is nice to see on newer computers. This board is probably from maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I would guess, based on the fact that it's 1156. So that's nice to see, a modern computer that still has floppy and IDE on it, because I like using IDE for DVD drives so I don't waste a SATA port. And here's what it has for slots. It has a PCI X16 slot up here. It's got 2 PCI slots, one of which I need for the wireless card. And it has what I think is an X4 slot down there, but as you can see on the end of it, there's no border in there, so you can actually stick a longer card in there and it'll only use that much of it. So you could use that probably for another graphics card, but I wouldn't recommend that. I'd use something like that for maybe a RAID card or just a PCI X1 card, if anything else. Let's see, it's got 3 USB headers down there. SPDIF. I don't know what that is. That looks like audio to me. There's your front panel stuff down there. Looks like a BIOS EEPROM right there. It has 6 SATA ports on it, so it's still pretty modern despite being a few years old. That's the serial header. No, that's the serial header. That's the parallel header right there. So even though it has serial over here, you can get an extra port, and you can get parallel out of it at the same time, which is kind of nice. One thing I like actually with the layout on this board is they put the CPU fan and and a case fan like right next to each other, so that's kind of handy. There's your voltage regulator circuit. Looks like it has 1, 2, 3, 4 regulators in there, and then you get 4-pin power. So obviously, I wouldn't use a high-powered CPU on this board just so you don't, stress the voltage regulators too much. So that's the board I'm using. I like this board so far. It looks pretty nice. So there you have it. It has solid capacitors in the voltage regulator circuit, and electrolytics most other places. Who makes these caps? I can't even tell, but they look decent enough. They're probably fine. So there you have it. Alright, this machine's coming together. I've put the CPU in and I've put the RAM in. The RAM is just ridiculously tall. I don't like this design with huge heat sinks because it gets in the way of coolers a lot of the time, which it actually might do here, so I might have to swap some RAM around, which kind of sucks, but whatever, man. So this is the cooler I'm going to be using. It's this Glacial Tech cooler I got from CompUSA for like $10. It is a really cheap cooler, but it uses a backplate. You can see the screws for it and the holes there. It uses a backplate design with real screws, so that's why I wanted to use it. Ironically, I've been using this cooler on socket 1155 systems, but the holes are the same for 1156 and 1155, and it even says that it's an 1156 cooler on here. So for once, I'm using an 1156 cooler on an 1156 computer. So we're going to use this one since it has that 4-pin fan. We'll stick it on there. I took this out of my Linux box actually, and I put the Intel stock cooler back in there. You can kind of see that there. So yeah, I just put the stock cooler in there because that'll cool just fine. So eventually this is going to get an i5 in it, so I figure I might as well use the eventual cooler that'll go in it, the 95 watt rated one. Alright, luckily this cooler just barely clears the RAM. Look how close that side of that fan is to the RAM. Anything bigger and it just wouldn't work. I'd have to put different RAM in here. And there we go, I got the cooler installed. Got some grease on there. Of course I use Arctic Silver 5 as usual. The board came with this little plastic thing over the socket, which is definitely good to see. Very happy about that. So there you have it. This board actually is themed really nicely. I have blue RAM on a blue board and a black CPU fan, so that all the colors go together. That's pretty nice looking on the inside. Not that I'll ever be looking at it, but still pretty nice looking. I'm proud of it. There. Now, to answer one question, I do not have the I/O shield for this motherboard. I had to order it I got all these parts on eBay, by the way. I got the board on eBay, I got the CPU on eBay. The RAM I already had, so that didn't come from eBay. But what is coming from eBay is the I/O shield. I ordered the I/O shield from the Netherlands, so it could take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month to get over here, thanks to customs taking forever over in Europe and in Asia too. So whenever that comes in, I'll just stick the I/O shield in with the board. But for now, I'm just going to run it without the I/O shield because it's really not that big a deal. I like having I/O shields on computers just so objects don't find their way in, and bugs and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's just nice to protect what's in the computer a little bit better that way. So, there you have it, folks. Now let's go dismantle the other computer and put this board in there. One thing I just noticed is this date here, July 5th, 2011. So maybe this board is fairly new. This board might only be 2 years old. There you go. So it is pretty new. Who would have thunk it? I'm guessing that's the date when this was manufactured, but don't count on that. This is what was in the bedside computer, if you recall. It's this ASRock board with a 770 AMD chipset and a Pentium 2X4 955 Black Edition in it. So I had a pretty good rig going on there. And now we're moving to something a little bit newer with a little bit better memory bandwidth, which is this. The processor will obviously be upgraded after a while, but this takes DDR3. This is 6 gigabytes of DDR2 memory, so that DDR2 is quite expensive now. It didn't used to be, but now it is. So there you have it. So we'll be moving on to this, putting it in there. Alright, I got all the parts in there. Just go over what the power supply is again. It's an Ultra LSP 550, manufactured by Channelwell, and it's actually a pretty decent power supply for what it is. It's served me well. It probably doesn't put out the full 550 watts, but I don't really need that in a computer like this anyway. So it served me well for the past couple of years, so I'm happy with it. Got a Sony OptiArc DVD drive in there, which is manufactured by NEC, I believe, because I had an NEC drive 8 years ago that looked exactly the same. There's the cooler and the RAM on the board there. Have the Galaxy Nvidia GT640 right in there, and the wireless card right in front of it. One thing I've noticed is since this is a micro ATX board, it's literally right in front of the fan, so at least there's a little bit of ventilation in the top there. That way the card can actually cool itself off. This card actually runs really, really cold anyway, like in the 30s as far as temperature goes, so I'm really not that worried about it. It's got these side-facing SATA ports, which can be a pain to me sometimes because I'm not used to them. Have a 1 terabyte Western Digital Caviar Black in there. And there you have it. Got it all buttoned up. Now it's time to install Windows on it. So let's get to it. One thing that's kind of funny looking is the lack of an I/O shield here. It just looks so wrong. It makes this computer look a little bit more ghetto, but once that I/O shield arrives here from the Netherlands, I'll stick it in here and use it. Wahey. Alright, I got the board started up. Everything seems to work. Here's the CPU. Here's how it detects it. It's an Intel Pentium dual-core G6950. So it's a 2.8 gigahertz dual-core chip. These are just as good as Core 2 Duos were, from what I've been told. So, you know, it'll function well enough. So, there you have it. It all seems to work. I think it's time to boot and install Windows. Alright, I got Windows 8 installing on here. Mainly just to see if this chipset on this motherboard, I think it's P55, if I remember right. Yeah, I forget what the chipset is. Something like that. H55 maybe. One of those two. Anyway, I'm installing Windows 8 to see if it'll work well with this board. If it doesn't, I'll put 7 on here and then be done with it. So, Either way, getting Windows on here, and whether it's 7 or 8, it honestly doesn't matter because I'll just be in a web browser most of the time anyway. So it really doesn't matter what OS this is. I could put Linux on here and use Chrome, and it would just be the same as doing it on Windows. But the main reason I have Windows on, the main reason I'm putting Windows on here is for native Netflix support without doing any weird workarounds or anything like that. So yeah, I'll just let this install and let it do its thing. Alright, I have the Windows Experience Index thingy running, so we can take a look at the ratings of this. I'm not sure what core this Pentium dual core is based off of. I'll install CPU-Z and then we'll take a look at that after we take a look at the performance ratings here. Here's the Windows Experience Index for this machine. As you can see, the processor definitely took a hit up moving to this particular type of build. Got a 6.5 for that. I bet when I upgrade to the i3 or i5 later on, it'll jump right back up. I'm not worried about that. The graphics are at a 6.9. That's as to be expected with that GT 640 I have in there. The RAM is good. The RAM is at a good speed, so eventually I'll upgrade the CPU. But that's still not bad for a pretty low-end chip. The Pentium dual core probably performs better than the Celeron I was going to get if I didn't win that one. So there you have it. We'll go into CPU-Z and see whether this is Clarkdale based or whatever the other chip was. Here's some more information about the Pentium. It is indeed a Clarkdale core, so it is a pretty good core actually. It's just a couple years old. Hopefully I can get a Clarkdale i5 or i3 at some point after this. But I'm going to see how this performs. I think it'll actually be good enough for what I do on this bedside machine, but I don't know, I might need something better eventually. I plan to upgrade it anyway just for future-proofing, but you never know. I'll see what my limits are with it. It supports quite a bit though. It has a virtualization extension. It's there, as you can see, so it's a pretty good chip. So that's been yet another rebuild of the bedside computer. As you can see, I'm transferring data back to it from my external hard drive there. Yeah. So this is socket 1156. I've never played with it before, and I've always been curious about it. So this will be my way of fooling around with it. I've always wanted to, and now I finally found something that's affordable I could do. The board was like $60. The CPU was $43 in total. So all in all, it was basically $100 to put this together, and that's nothing to put a machine together, in my opinion. So I say that's a pretty good deal. And I look forward to upgrading this to an i3 or an i5 later on to see what the Clarkdale chips can do as compared to the Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge chips. So there you have it. 1156. I felt like in my computing life that's a socket I kind of glossed over, and I kind of wanted to come back to it and check it out. So that's my reasoning for buying this. It's just for fun, really, more than anything else. Plus an Intel chipset board will be more compatible with Windows 8 and Linux and other things. So having the H55 chipset will just be a nice thing to have on this bedside computer anyway. Plus, I like the board. It's a nice board. Plus, it's also coming back to ASUS boards. I haven't bought one since 2006, so it's kind of a comeback and see how things are type of deal as far as that's concerned, and then going back to 1156 just to see what the platform is like to use. So enough of my rambling and reasoning through buying yet more computer crap. I'll leave you with that. Have a good one, everybody. Ciao.